Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Susukhaṃ Vata Jivāma Verine Suvaverino Verine Sumanusesu Viharama Averinoti. Today's Dhammapada verse is taken from the Sukhavagga, verse 197. It was spoken by the Buddha on a very important occasion, the occasion of a conflict between the Sakyan and the Kolian tribes. Now, as you know, the Buddha was from the Sakya tribe, and the Sakyans were a Khattiya or warrior tribe, as were the Kolians. And from ancient times they had been relatives, and they would intermarry. But as is often the case, it's relatives that quarrel the most fiercely. So here's a translation of the verse from Burlingame. O happily let us live, free from hatred among those who hate. Among men who hate, let us live free from hatred. So, according to the Dhammapada commentary, the Buddha spoke 3 verses to the Sakyans and the Kolians. At the end of that, the conflict was ended. According to the commentary to the Kunala Jataka, the introduction to the Kunala Jataka, the Buddha spoke 5 Jataka tales, as well as 1 sutta, the Attadanda Sutta. And after giving these teachings, not only did the conflict end, each of the 2 sides, the Sakyans and the Kolians, sent a group of young men to ordain with the Buddha, and they would later attain on the occasion of the Mahasamaya Sutta, which is one of the most important Paritta chants, protective chants in the Pali tradition. So, first let's look at the story of the conflict, translation by Burlingame, and after that we'll have a quick look at the Attadanda Sutta, which starts from the very basic Dhamma and leads to the highest Dhamma. This religious instruction was given by the teacher while he was in residence among the Sakyas with reference to the cessation of a quarrel amongst kinsmen. The story goes that the Sakyas and the Koliyas caused the waters of the river Rohini to be confined by a single dam between the city of Kapilavatthu and the city of Koliya, and cultivated the fields on both sides of the river. Now, in the month of Jettamula, the crops began to droop, whereupon the labourers employed by the residents of both cities assembled. Said the residents of the city of Koliya, if this water is diverted to both sides of the river, there will not be enough for both you and for us too, but our crops will ripen with a single watering. Therefore, let us have the water. The Sakyas replied, after you have filled your storehouses, we shall not have the heart to take ruddy gold and emeralds and black pennies, and baskets and sacks in our hands, go from house to house seeking favours at your hands. Our crops will also ripen with a single watering. Therefore let us have this water. We will not give it to you, neither will we give it to you. Talk waxed bitter, until finally one arose and struck another a blow. The other returned the blow, and a general fight ensued, the combatants making matters worse by aspersions on the origin of the 2 royal families. Said the labourers employed by the Koliyas, you who live in the city of Kapilavatthu, take your children and go where you belong. Are we likely to suffer harm from the dogs and horses and shields and weapons of those who, like dogs and jackals, have cohabited with their own sisters? The labourers employed by the Sakyas replied, you lepers, take your children and go where you belong. Are we likely to suffer harm from the elephants and horses and shields and weapons of destitute outcasts who have lived in jujube trees like animals? Both parties of labourers went and reported the quarrel to the ministers who had the charge of the work, and the ministers reported the matter to the royal households. Thereupon the Sakyas came forth and armed for battle, and cried out, we will show what strength and power belong to those who have cohabited with their sisters. Likewise, the Koliyas came forth armed for battle, and cried out, we will show what strength and power belong to those who dwell in jujube trees. As the teacher surveyed the world at dawn and beheld his kinsmen, he thought to himself, if I refrain from going to them, These men will destroy each other. It is clearly my duty to go to them." Accordingly, he flew through the air, quite alone, to the spot where his kinsmen were gathered together, and seated himself cross-legged in the air over the middle of the river Rohini. When the teacher's kinsmen saw the teacher, they threw away their weapons and did reverence to him. Said the teacher to his kinsmen, "What is all this quarrel about, great king? We do not, Bhante." "Who then would be likely to know?" "The commander-in-chief of the army would be likely to know." The commander-in-chief of the army said, "The viceroy would be likely to know." Thus the teacher put the question first to one and then to another, asking the slave laborers last of all. The slave laborers replied, "The quarrel is about water, Bhante." Then the teacher asked the king, "How much is water worth, great king?" "Very little, Bhante." "How much are Katyas worth, great king?" "Katyas are beyond price, Bhante." "It is not fitting that because of a little water you should destroy Katyas who are beyond price." They were silent. Then the teacher addressed them and said, "Great kings, why do you act in this manner? Were I not here present today, you would set flowing a river of blood. You have acted in a most unbecoming manner. You live in enmity, indulging in the 5 kinds of hatred. I live free from hatred. You live afflicted with the sickness of evil passions. I live free from disease. You live in eager pursuit of the 5 kinds of sensual pleasure. I live free from the eager pursuit of aught." So saying, he pronounced the following verses, the following stanzas. So the stanza that we are discussing today, he's translated as, "Oh, happily let us live, free from hatred among those who hate. Among men who hate, let us live free from hatred." So a simple teaching. Actually, this verse is more of an aspiration than an instruction. So it's a reminder that right effort is to remove this evil root of hatred from our minds. But the actual practice of doing this is a little more complicated than that. Then we have to restrain our bodily behavior, our verbal behavior, and then slowly train the mind if we want to actually dwell free from hatred amongst those who hate. So then the more detailed teaching that can be found in the Attaka of the Sutta Nipata, it's called the Attadanda Sutta. It gives a little more detail how to remove this hatred, how to dwell without hatred in the midst of those who hate. However, the sutta is a little bit dense. It's a poem, and it explains the entirety of the Buddhist path, but we won't be able to unpack the entire thing today. But the basic principle, the Buddha is describing the time when he was a bodhisattva, and he reflected on the fear that people have in a world of competition, where there are not enough resources, but everybody is fighting for them, just like the Sakyans and the Kolians fighting over the water of the Rohini. So here's the translation of the Attadanda Sutta by Ajahn Thanissaro. When embraced, the rod of violence breeds danger and fear. Look at people quarreling. I will tell of how I experienced dismay, seeing people floundering like fish in small puddles, competing with one another. As I saw this, fear came into me. The world was entirely without substance. All the directions were knocked out of line. Wanting a haven for myself, I saw nothing that wasn't laid claim to. Seeing nothing in the end but competition, I felt discontent. And then I saw an arrow here, so very hard to see, embedded in the heart. Overcome by this arrow, you run in all directions. But simply on pulling it out, you don't run, you don't sink. Whatever things are tied down in the world, you shouldn't be set on them. Having totally penetrated sensual pleasures, sensual passions, you should train for your own unbinding. Be truthful, not insolent, not deceptive, rid of divisiveness. Without anger, the sage should cross over the evil of greed and avarice. He should conquer laziness, weariness, sloth. Shouldn't consort with heedlessness. Shouldn't stand firm in his pride. The man with his his heart set on unbinding, he shouldn't engage in lying, shouldn't create a sense of allure and form, should fully fathom conceit, and live refraining from impulsiveness, shouldn't delight in what's old, prefer what's new, grieve over decline, get entangled in what's dazzling and bright. I call greed a great flood, hunger a swift current. Preoccupations are ripples, sensuality a bog hard to cross over. Not deviating from the truth, a sage stands on high ground, a Brahman. Having renounced all, he is said to be at peace. Having known clearly, he is an attainer of wisdom. Knowing the Dhamma, he is independent. Moving rightly through the world, he doesn't envy anyone here. Whoever here has gone over and beyond sensual passions, an attachment hard to transcend in the world, doesn't sorrow, doesn't fret. He, his stream cut, is free from bonds. Burn up what's before, and have nothing for after. If you don't grasp what's in between, you will go about calm. For whom, in name and form, in every way, there's no sense of mine, and who doesn't grieve over what is not, he in the world isn't defeated, suffers no loss. To whom there doesn't occur, this is mine, for whom nothing is others, feeling no sense of mineness, doesn't grieve at the thought, I have nothing. Not harsh, not greedy, not perturbed, everywhere in tune. This is the reward, I say when asked, for those who are free from preconceptions. For one unperturbed who knows, there is no accumulating, abstaining, unaroused. He everywhere sees security. The sage doesn't speak of himself as among those who are higher, equal, or lower. At peace, free of selfishness, he doesn't embrace, doesn't reject, the Blessed One said. So this is actually a very deep teaching, and then the Buddha has addressed many aspects. But you can see from this story that actually the Sakyan and the Kolian people, they didn't give up, they didn't become monks, they didn't attain arahat. What they did do is get faith, and they sent some of their members to become monks. So from that we can understand that what they understood here was something about their behavior and something about suitable goals in life. So you can see that there are a few roots of the conflict between these two peoples. And one of the roots is simply a fear. As the Buddha taught in this Attadanda Sutta, like fish struggling in a pond with not enough water, there are just not enough resources in the area of this Rohini river. And so the people are struggling from fear. They're afraid that they won't have enough food, and then they're afraid that if they don't have enough food, then they will be in a very low position. They'll be dependent on others for it. They'll have to go and beg from the other side. So that brings us to the second root of the conflict, that's pride. Now the Sakyans and the Kolians were both famously proud peoples. They're republics, not kingdoms. So most of the countries in the area were kingdoms, but these were republics. So it means that they had a ruling class, and they were Khattiyas, or warrior class. So they were very careful about who they would marry, and if there was any sort of a loss of face or some sort of insult to their name, then they would take terrible revenge. So you can see in another story, Dhammapada story, the story of Vidudaba, he felt, because of an insult, what he felt was an insult to his father, he attacked the Sakyan kingdom and later killed almost all of them. So then reflecting on these dangers and the unsuitability of conflict, then they were able to at least not fight each other over the water of the Rohini. So then the question is, how do we dwell without hatred amongst those who hate? It's not necessarily easy, but the first step is to remember the verse, to remember this this goal, this orientation, that it's not suitable to dwell in hatred. The results of it, the karmic results are dangerous, and the results in this life are also can be quite harmful, often resulting in enmity or imprisonment. So looking at the deeper way, how to remove this hatred, to dwell without hatred, it means to develop the Noble Eightfold Path completely. So there are many different places one can see the Noble Eightfold Path. You can see it in the gradual training, for example, in the Digha Nikaya, in the Samanyapala Sutta, or also it's in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, formulated as the Four Noble Truths, and many other places as well. But you can say, if you start just by reflecting on the teachings, and by knowing the goal, and by knowing what is to be developed, then at least you have a chance to develop it, and a chance to develop, a chance to realize this Maggapala, a chance to abandon hatred and put an end to all suffering. So I wish all of you be able to dwell without hatred amongst those who hate, and to attain Nibbana as quickly as possible.